The thing that I did not want to do, I did not want to pursue the guardianship piece. I was trying everything in my power that she and I could work that out and do this together. But I didn't have an option. My mother was so closed, right? So independent, so strong. You just didn't get in there. So now here's this, who is he? How did this happen? And he is that personal with my mother that he's coming over in the morning to put in her eye drops.
Whatever little bit she needed done around the house or whatever, the price tag kept going up.
He and his brother and whomever else, they were there the first of the month. When the paycheck, her retirement and Social Security came, she was giving them that, and then she was also withdrawing money out of her savings. By the time we knew they were that embedded in her world that they knew her Social Security number and they could call Social Security, so we knew we had a huge problem. And now I am going to declare her incompetent, I'm taking everything. That's how it felt to me. So I know intellectually I'm protecting her, but on an emotional level, it's like a death. You often hear people talk about Alzheimer's and how many times it's like a slow death, but I can honestly say, it's a death. The woman that I knew and I grew up with, that wasn't the woman who was giving away her money. The disease is so hard. She just became this person that I didn't know.
Mom and I were very close because I think when you go with your family, especially your mother as your blood, and then on top of that, you're going through some harsh times, there's a connection there. I grew up in Greece. In 1974, there was a war in Cyprus, so my mom and I were refugees and left the country, escaped from the Turkish war and fled into the country in Greece. Bombs falling. I remember I was playing with a little truck and my grandma and my mom and my aunt were making bakery stuff, and all of a sudden I remember I heard the noise, I heard the sound, the whole ground shake, and my mom picked me up and we left. Another snapshot was we're in the mountains for a week. We move at night. I remember everybody used to say shh, 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 shh all the time because we were trying to escape from the war. And in the daylight, we would stay under trees and don't move completely. That way planes can see you when they fly by, or they hear us if the military goes by. And we did that for about a week, and then after that, a ship. That was terrible. A lot of waves. Mom and I were throwing up and all that. I remember that was in the water. I can remember the window, those raw windows, we would go down. That was terrible. Cold, was miserable. My mom is everything to me. I was an only child, so I was her gold and silver at the same time. She taught me a lot of things, and one of the things was if you have nothing good to say, don't say anything at all. She was very kind, tough as nails. She still is. She's 75 years old. She worked her butt off for me to have the things that I need to have, even if there's not that much. We fight, arguing. I mean, she's my mama, but we forget each other like that.
John is my uncle. We grew up in the same household, more like siblings. I was raised by his mother. She acted as my mother. He and I have just always taken care of one another. I can remember John teaching me how to fight when I was a young girl. There was some bullying going on, and he was not going to allow me to be bullied. So we always had this relationship where we kind of took care of one another, deep friendship. John went into the Marines when he was 19 years old. I was 10 at that time. You would think that would have been a great idea. For a kid coming up as John was in a rough neighborhood, in poverty, not having a lot of opportunities, the military would normally be a great answer. But I just sensed that it wasn't going to play out as we had hoped. And so the morning that John left to go to the Marines, I just went into a full-on dramatic tantrum. I just did not want to see him go. I was dead set against it, and I wanted to do everything in my power to prevent that from happening. And I just couldn't, I was just a kid, and it was the decision he made. And it really wasn't until John came home with a an honorable discharge, that we were clear on what it was that was happening. And what played out was he became paranoid schizophrenic, and I couldn't tap into John when he would be in those upset modes, but I could tap into him a lot other times. We would watch music videos together. He loved to listen to me sing. I could get him to, maybe help with the dishes every once in a while. I became his best friend.
I do concur. It was difficult, very difficult to relinquish a lot of my personal belongings to others or to have it trashed. It was a way of saying you're on your way out, and all you're going to have from here on out is basically a bed, a toilet, and some simple clothes and a chair and some food. That's it. That's the whole life. Whereas before I had a lot of tangible things that I used to enjoy looking at, touching, feeling, pictures that I would able to see on the wall, which I can't have on a wall any longer because there's no more room. Tools that I'm able to use, which I can't use anymore. And the move as well was highly difficult for me. So the two together is a traumatic experience for me.
It's interesting that he said that it impacted him so much, because that's the first time I've ever heard that. He often would say things like, well, I don't really leave the house in Pennsylvania, so it's not really going to be that much of a change for me. He didn't resist because he knew that it was going to help Mom be able to help him more, is how I heard it from you. Yes. Is that you would do whatever it took. I think the biggest obstacle was just the downsizing, and that's what overwhelmed my mom the most, was how am I going to get all of the stuff in a new home so we can get to a smaller place. And once I said, Stephen and I will figure that out, just trust us. It will be gone, and you will arrive, and you will have what you need at the new place.
Charlie and I had been partners for many years at a distance, because he's a teacher in Chapel Hill. I was an optometrist in Nashville, and Easter of 2017, we were biking together.
It was a beautiful day, and we were out for a ride. And I mentioned to Paul that I thought I was going to go down to this park and kind of take an easier ride, and offered him the opportunity to take off and do a big long one. But Paul, in his graciousness, said, no, I want to ride with you. So we went to the park. Paul went through a grassy area and hit a small dip in the grass, which stopped his bike, and he didn't stop. I was right behind him, and so I can still see him falling off his bike.
And I went straight over the handlebars onto my head and bent my neck. And that was it. I knew as I lay on the ground that I couldn't feel my arms and legs. I knew something serious that was going to change my life. It just happened.
Caregiving and care receiving is peppered across our lifetimes. We come into this world vulnerable. We leave vulnerable. And in between the coming and going, we're vulnerable. If this vulnerability is built into our life experience, then so is caregiving and care receiving. Caregiving's not an outlier. It's not an interruption to real life. The ebb and flow of caregiving is part of the nature of relationships. Still, it often comes unexpectedly, either by unforeseen event or illness, or subtler changes that accumulate and are at first hard to notice. That happened for me when my dad began to decline. It took some time for me to realize what was needed and embrace that I was, in fact, a caregiver. And then my partner and I were caregiving again when my mom became too ill to live alone and came to live with us for a stretch of time. It took me 3 years to find a new normal after that period, not because it was so difficult, and it was, but because it fundamentally shifted my perspective, made me profoundly aware of my own vulnerability, and changed my understanding of my own future. If I'm being totally honest, I can say that caregiving brought out the very best and the worst in me. Because caregiving, it cuts both ways. Often, it's one of the most difficult things we'll ever do, balancing caregiving with the rest of life, sometimes for long periods. But if we can rise above the nonstop intensity of it and witness our own process, it has a lot to teach us, and it has the potential to bring us closer, like nothing else. Both sides of the caregiving experience, the giver and the receiver, learn deep vulnerability, making change before we want to, losing capacities we once had, and allowing those who love us to stand in for what we once did on our own, and learning when and how to be that stand-in with grace and respect and love. That's the work of caregiving, that changing of perspective. These are the stories of caregiving families and the skills and wisdom they've gained. We offer them to you as guideposts on your way. You'll add your journey to it. And take heart, caregiving and care receiving. It's the nature of relationships. It's the changing of perspectives again and again. How we approach caregiving and receiving, our intent about it, has a lot to do with the quality of how we experience it. It might seem simplistic to say that love is the primary intent of caregiving, but on some level, love is at the core of it. But love expresses itself uniquely and looks different in each circumstance.
Eventually, John came down with stage 3 lymphoma. So at that time, I volunteered to have John come live with me, and we would travel to his treatments and work through this disease together. I had an ulterior motive, though, because I'm a holistic life coach, and I knew what he was eating, and I knew what he wasn't doing in the way of lifestyle choices at the group home, and I really felt like I could be a good positive influence there. And so he came to live with me, and we basically just turned his whole world upside down and beat that lymphoma to the ground.
My wife Trish always says, we got to bring mom here, but to do what? As older you get, more social you are, better it is for you as your health, emotionally and physically. Doesn't mean necessarily because you exercise, you eat right, you're going to be physically healthy if you emotionally you're not healthy and you're depressed. I want her to be here. Emotionally we'll be here good, but then at the same time, my wife and I work, my kids are busy. Then what? Is she going to be here by herself in the house? The culture there is about socialize. So there's neighbors come in, let's have a coffee in the morning before I go to work. In the afternoon, it's a siesta time. Okay, I just worked 6 hours, work hard. Now I'm gonna go enjoy myself with my friends. Maybe I'll go see my aunt, which is my mom, have a little coffee, have a little lunch together, and then I will leave and go back to work, and then she would take her nap. She not gonna have that cycle of, if I bring her here, she's not an American citizen, so that means I cannot get her insurance. Now what? Now let's say she got sick. Now what I do? Do I take it in the hospital? Taxpayers might end up paying for that, but then what? Do I keep going doing that? I don't think that makes any sense.
One thing about spinal cord injury is it's hard to predict the outcome. It can take 6 months to a year to know where you're headed in your outcome. I thought, 6 months? You've got to be kidding me. Well, I see why now they say that, because there's no way really of telling how many neurons are killed and how many are damaged and how many will come back.
Anybody could say, well, you didn't sign up for this, you don't have to. Well then, if I chose to leave because it felt too hard, he would get the care I imagine he needs by someone else, but I would miss him, and I want to be with him. And that brings me back to my heart and what I really want. And it's not that I'm being here to help Paul. I'm here because I love Paul. And it requires a different way of being together. But we're finding really, we're finding a lot of joy.
I think that our family had a value around family. I grew up with the respect of you honor your parents, you know. And so I never even imagined not being in touch with my mother. There were times when I felt like it was an obligation. I certainly have shared that with Mark. There were times that got a little tiring and draining, but I think my mother, with what she had to work with, the tools in her toolbox, she did an amazing job. Now, it took me a while to get to that. I didn't get to that realization until late in life, but yeah. I think the hard part was that she never got to know parts of me. I think on some level, I may have had hopes, just like kids do, right? That maybe, just maybe, one day we'll be close.
Often, choosing with intent is a matter of noticing our instincts for when and how to act.
If you wait too long, then you are not part of the decision. And so many people make that mistake, and then their children are put in that forced situation and that uncomfortable conversation that it must be to say, now, you can no longer live here. I mean, with us, it was like suggestions and ideas, and we were part of the decision.
One time she went home and, oh, okay, he working? Is he coming next time? So that told me then when she asked me, when she said that, Mama Black said that, are you coming next time? Yes, ma'am. That told me every time she came, I needed to be there.
Which was so important for me because I needed the support.
And it was a pleasure just to be there with them and for them. When I did something for her, it was sort of like, oh, here, let me pay you. No, ma'am. You want to pay me, can I have another piece of pound cake?
When things are changing fast, sometimes we really need to get into the weeds for a while. Choosing with intent means having our compass set to our true north, what's likely to give us the most wholeness, and then letting things unfold.
One thing I focused on when we moved to our apartment was to create a beautiful, stable environment for us. And one of the first things I did was put beautiful flowers outside on our porch. And I got him a desk that lifted up, and so he can now look at, we have bird feeders. And so I think it's about how to make our lives beautiful. You can have a long list of reasons why you can't be happy and why it's challenging, and sometimes I've listed those, but as Paul says, it doesn't get you anywhere. So I think it's really about reminding yourself moment by moment, how can you be present and do what's needed.
In the beginning, our only objective was to defeat the cancer and to get John well. And I don't know that we really had any long-term goals beyond that. I think we both foresaw that, once that was the case, because I was very confident we could defeat his cancer. I never considered any other alternative. And so once we accomplished that objective, I think we both kind of thought that, things would go back to the way they were. But in the end, I didn't want to see that. I was really concerned that he was going to go back into the group home situation. He was going to go back to being completely idle. He was going to go back to eating this terrible food that's more profit-driven than it is nutrition-based. And I just really felt like that would be the catalyst for the cancer to come back. So we started exploring other things. Ideally, finding a group home that offered some holistic living services would have been ideal, but they're just not out there. And it was always up to John if he wanted to return home, but we talked about it, and the proposal came up that we just maintain living together, and he wanted that, and so did I.
I'm loving it, and I was a gardener, but I'm glad I don't have to do it anymore. I mean, how did I do all that? And life is better. Life is just better, and life is easier, and we will have a longer life because you're getting rid of some of those stresses that you don't even realize you're under. Like Marla said to me one time, Mom, you're so busy working and doing that you don't even see that life could be better.
Less is more.
Oh my gosh. That's huge. That's a breakthrough.
Yeah, it is.
Good for you.
Less is more.
I always prepare my kids. I said, if Yaya's here for 35 days and you're not spending time with him, I'm gonna kill you. That's off the records, Mike. That's just, I told him, I said, that's my expectations. You have to be present, physically and mentally present. I don't want you to be doing this and your Yaya's talking to you. Even me sometimes, I want to go mountain biking for crying out loud. I saw my mom for 4 days. I'm anxious to go ride my bike. My wife says, if you do that, he says, I'm going to hang you upside down and use it as a piñata. Which she's right. So 35 days, we spent time together and we had a great time. I mean, great time. I love every moment of it. The love is there. We talk, we laugh, we cry, we laugh, we cry, we make fun of each other. It doesn't get better than that.
I have to ask for almost everything. I'm doing more and more movement with my hands, but it's not really useful yet. Being at a sitting height all the time is different. Sitting down all the time, I'm just not an active person, is different. Not being able to open a door or eat. When you're in a restaurant and the guy sitting next to you is feeding you, I could look around and say to myself, what do these other people think of me? But I really don't take it that way. It doesn't affect me, how they think about me. I'm here to live my own life. Charlie had to go from an independent person who lived alone most of the time to always living for two people. He's always got to think of me and him, and that's going to be hard.
Change in the realm of caregiving can be a different kind of change. Let's face it, as we go along in life, often change happens because we're striving for something new, a new baby, a new home, a new job. And while stressful, there is a sense of moving forward. But often, the changes associated with caregiving are due to new limitations or losses. And that can be really painful or even scary.
I was frustrated, I was angry, I was afraid, every emotion you can name. And I had that part of me that was mad that I've got to now take care of this mother who didn't, at least who I didn't feel took care of me in the way I needed. She took care of me in the best way that she could, which was enough. But still coming to terms with, and that my hopes of maybe some emotional connection, they're gone. That hope that I had, just maybe, it's gone, because she's gone.
But I feel very bad that I could not contribute because of my physical condition. You see me sitting here, that's what I was doing the whole time. She was packing, getting rid of things, and I cried a couple of times and sitting in the chair because I couldn't do anything. And even today, I feel bad because I can't do anything to help her here. I'm not that kind of a person. I would like to do things. I can't even hammer a nail in a wall, and I can't drive anymore. I relied heavily on Teresa and my daughter Marlo, and of course Janine as well. They put the whole package together, and I supported them wherever I could, verbally, basically.
From what I've seen, we're most adaptable when we can accept our feelings about the change, allow those feelings, and then we adopt the perspective that this too is part of life, and we accept it bit by bit. Acceptance takes some of the burn out of change.
You learn to let go of schedules because certain things happen and you have to attend to that. And things take longer. I think it's really about how you show up and what can you be grateful for.
I cry in front of my boys all the time, and I'm tough as nails. My wife would tell you I'm tough. I'm tough on a lot of things. But at the same time, I have to show my boys that there's times where I will cry, and that's how it works. That doesn't mean makes you weak on it.
You go through these stages of accepting that this is our life. And Paul's still Paul.
Yeah, I did have to rethink and revisit the way I've thought about disabled people. We are in the same boat together. It doesn't matter that you've got muscular dystrophy and may not get better, or you may hurt your back and you may get better. This is where you are now. This is where I'm now.
I had a mother who was had Alzheimer's, and she was very resistive to everything that we offered her. Any suggestion that we gave her, she was resistive. And I made up my mind that I was never going to do that to my daughters. They're smart, this younger generation. They're savvy. They know how to do things. So I'm going to be open to this. But it was difficult, but I'm going to be open to it. I'm not going to resist. I'm going to go along. It's going to be hard, but I'm not alone. We're not alone. They were there. I mean, my son-in-laws, unbelievable, both of them.
I think you go through stages because the needs change. The reason we chose Shepherd Hospital was they train people to be caregivers from the beginning. So that's where I began to learn how to do things efficiently, how to get Paul in and out of bed, the best way to help him get dressed. I remember when they were teaching us we actually went out in Atlanta with his wheelchair and practiced what do we do in this situation. And I remember just feeling, oh my gosh, we're going outside the doors of the hospital. What if we hit this or this bump? But we don't even think about that now. That just becomes second nature after a while.
You just tell yourself you can do this, and if you have the support of family, which Maura has been wonderful, you can get this done.
Embracing change means we get into productive action to move forward.
The most significant choice that has been made, since John and I have been together has been our relocation to a new state. And that really came out of my own need. I was in a position where I could purchase a home again. I had lost everything in the recession, and the property values where we were currently living did not allow me to buy what I would consider a modest home. And it became real obvious to me that I needed to move out of state and, look to my own future. And so I was not really sure how this would sit with John. And so, I had the conversation with him that this was my intention, this was why, and what do you want to do, John? I'll support whatever you want to do. You can come, you can go back to a group home setting, or, we could find some other sort of residential options for you. And John decided he wanted to come with me. And so we didn't really know how that was going to turn out. And so, I loaded up my little Kia and we drove across the country. So far, it's exceeded my expectations.
I was so accustomed to seeing my mother in a certain way all those years, And then think about by me being from a distance, it took longer for me to see. Maybe I would have seen more if I was there. But I don't know that I'm that unusual because there's so many adult children that don't live near their parents anymore. So it is harder to see it. On one of my trips home, I got one of the electric bills, the phone. I just got a physical bill so that I could then set up accounts with the utility companies. That's how I did it. I still had the issue of the pension and the Social Security. And my mother did not have direct deposit because my mother liked having a physical check. So every month she had a physical check delivered and they were right there. And they would go to the bank and cash the check. That was really what then propelled me to continue to work with my attorney to figure out what are the next steps we need to take, because I needed to be able to have control of that money so that I could take care of her.
One thing I've noticed about Mom and Dad is, when they moved here, they didn't just say, okay, we're here, now what? They said, okay, we're here, now we're gonna go figure it out. And so the very first week Mom was here, she actually fell the week before she moved and dislocated her shoulder, which definitely slowed her down a bit.
Yes.
But she had a friend here that she had met several years ago, and I put her in touch with that friend. And this friend invited her to a Bible study at church, but it wasn't of Mom's particular faith. And my mom said, no, I just can't, at this point in my life, I can't change, I can't go to a different church. And I said, what if you reframed it and thought of it just as a spiritual book club? Not that they're gonna try and convert you. And she really, I have to give her a lot of credit, put aside her feelings of discomfort and went ahead and went to that group. Even with her arm in a sling, she put herself out there.
First of all, I've never done anything like that before, but it has been wonderful. It's really been very helpful because it just makes you think all the time about, what's important in life. You have to put yourself outside that door. I used to say the joke, no one's going to knock on the door and say, Teresa, come on out.
I would say don't ever be afraid of change. Don't ever resist an altered course. This caregiving role may serve you and may serve the person that you're caring for in this moment, last week, but maybe next week not so much. And I would just say hold it lightly. So although I'd like to think that John and I will be together forever, I also know that his highest and best good may not be within that equation. So I think a lot of times our natural instinct is to resist change. And I think it's a better course of action to ride the change out. Maybe introduce a new caregiver or introduce a new exercise program or introduce a new social activity, because things are always evolving towards a higher and better expression for all of us.
My therapist at the time said, I said, well, what do you think about the idea of buying a house at this point? And he said, well, I don't really share my opinion much, but he said, I can imagine buying a house on top of all that you're doing. Every time I thought, no, we can't do this, something would open up. So Quakers say that way opens, and the way kept opening, and so I finally just said, no, the way keeps opening, so just go with it.
Taking care of elderly, I think, is the most expensive and is most hardest thing to do as a kid. That is, you grow up now, you got your own family, and now you got to take care of your elderly parents. It's really hard. And emotionally, it's drainage. I want to have some time with my wife just to talk, but now I have to take care of this person, but I have to take care of this person. That's my blood and family. I got to do it. Is that a burden to my wife because it's my mom? Or her mom and dad, are they going to be burdened to me because I'm their son-in-law, if you think about it? But we have to take care of them. There's no option. It's not the time that you put in. It's hard on you as a child because your parents were your superheroes, the ones that were good to you. Obviously, there's a lot of effed up parents out there, I'm sure. Not a lot of them, but some. For me, that's the hardest part.
I think that there are moments that you have flashes of, oh my God, how will I be able to do this? Will this ever be different, from just constant care until you're exhausted at night? you know, we arrived at the apartment and the air conditioning wasn't working. It was so hot, and and there was a leak upstairs, so there's water dripping down from and we were in boxes, and we didn't have automatic lift for Paul, and so we were using this crank lift, and it was just like, oh, you know, we couldn't find the coffee filter, and it was like.
From the time where we were surrounded by nurses to a time where we were by ourselves. He was it.
Taking care of ourselves may be one of the most challenging parts of caregiving, and care receiving as well. The situational demands can seem as though they require total focus, leaving little time for anything else. Bottom line, if we don't take care of our health and well-being, everything else, and frankly everyone else, suffers. Self-care has to have significant priority, even though it has to flex a bit.
I truly take the time to go within and ask myself, why am I being so impatient with John? Why am I all of a sudden feeling overburdened? Why am I feeling edgy and frustrated? And when I take those moments to be introspective, I find that it isn't because I'm overworked. I find that it isn't because I'm overwhelmed. It's because I'm not taking care of me. What I'll find is I'm being short and frustrated with John because I'm not doing my own self-care. Maybe it's I'm not playing music, I'm not singing. Maybe it's that I'm not spending enough time with my own animals. Maybe it's that I'm not doing yoga. Maybe it's that I'm not eating the things that I know support me. But it's always about the self-care of my own being. And so I know that when I'm sensing and having those kind of emotions, I need to draw it all back, come back to center, and figure out what is it that I'm not doing for myself that will put this all back into balance again.
Paul always encourages me to go and get exercise. I've only ridden my bike a few times since the accident, and I missed that. I've done some hiking. I just started back to work. I loved being back in the classroom and with the kids because it was something totally different and something I feel very confident in doing. So it actually felt good to get some time away even though I was working.
It was really important for me to find a place that had a building community. The other thing I knew is that I couldn't be their social support, that I needed to have them find one for themselves. And this community met that need for them and for me.
So you can imagine over the last year we've had a lot of chaos, shaking off a lot of physical disease and financial ruin and many things. I was having some trouble with my elderly cat. He started having accidents in the house, but I started thinking about what is he trying to show me? And what I came to determine was he was overwhelmed with change. He was feeling pushed and pulled in every direction, and he didn't feel like he had a stable foundation. And once I recognized that, I thought, sure, I get it. So I just simplified his world to the garage, actually. Kept it very simple. Food, water, no sound, litter box, one space. And then of course took those very same initiatives for myself. And we both came out of it with flying colors in about a week. Yeah, no more accidents, and we're all feeling much calmer.
Gina and I have always have done things together, but also been independent. We used to scuba dive, both of us, back in the day. We used to like to garden together. We liked camping together, those family type things. But then we always had separate interests. So that has never been an issue in our marriage of 53 years. I do have to try and take him out more, get him out that door physically, whereas before he could do it himself. But when I have my separate interests, out the door I go.
And while she's away, I listen to music, classical, country. I love country music, opera. And I still keep tabs in my profession to keep my mind going. And then, of course, exercising to keep my leg strength back And I do make calls to friends that I've left back in Pennsylvania, and just enjoy sitting there and looking out at nature.
I did find a therapist because I was at a point where I just thought, I have to talk to someone. The first month when we were home, away from the hospital care, I just felt tears every single day. There was one point where I just thought, just take some breaths. You can do this. Just take some deep breaths. I mean, almost feeling panicked. But that said to me, you need some help. So I found a therapist, and just talking about it and feeling a safe place to feel sad. So that has to happen.
Self-care is about fostering our own well-being, but it also looks like identifying what others can do to support us. That's actually how we become self-responsible, by asking for what we need. We don't have to do it all ourselves, and the one who is asked to help also benefits by being able to express their love and support.
I think that taking the risk to ask for help, that lots of people want to offer something, and be specific. Like, I need some help cleaning out this basement, and one job I have are paint cans that are old. So somebody needs to look at them and get them where they need to go so they're properly, and just think in organized ways of, okay, that's a task that you don't have to do right now, and a friend would love to do it. So I think making requests of people, and people can say no, but they're not going to do it if you don't ask.
And I tell some people here in the community, the few friends that we made, that we bought this place sight unseen, their eyes just get like, what? You did what? And I said, well, my daughter said to me, Mom, you have to trust me. You have to trust me. And I thought, yes, I have to trust them.
But when Mom did first move here and she dislocated her shoulder, my second son has a great passion for cooking. And so he provided meals for her at least twice a week. These chairs needed to be put together. My son helped to put them together, or did it for her because they weren't able to physically do that.
Right.
My husband hung all the pictures in the entire place.
My son-in-law had to drive us out. I had planned to drive out myself. I've done it for 20 years. I didn't think it'd be a problem. I just turned that trust over to them, that they would help me to do whatever needed to be done that I couldn't do. That's harder for me because I've always been very independent, but I'm learning to say, okay.
And sometimes we need to recognize a hard truth that caregiving for someone may be hazardous to our own well-being, and we give ourselves permission to change course or disengage. This too is a form of self-care.
This is now where it gets ugly. My dad's side. I'm very happy that I don't have to deal with him. I say, you're one person minus for me, that I don't have to deal with you. If you go down, if you get elderly and you need help, I'm not going to help you. The damage that he's done, mistakes after mistakes after mistakes after mistakes. I mean, this is huge mistakes. He can't change the fact is that he's going to rip you off, he's going to manipulate you and do certain things for his own good. He made his own bed, he's going to sleep on it. Maybe it's the wrong part for myself. Maybe when he passes away, maybe it will hit me hard. But right now, it is what it is.
I do think she wanted me to stay there and take care of her like she took care of her mother. She stayed there. My mother was a brilliant woman, but she made a decision to stay right there in Louisiana where she was born. And taking care of her mother was a big deal to her. I do feel like on some level there was a little rub there because she had a hope that I would come back and do that. So I think my family, since they were there, boots on the ground, if you will, they were able to do those things that I really couldn't do. I never felt judged that I should be there. My family understood the relationship I had with my mother. They watched that growing up, so they knew my mother. They knew her limitations in terms of the emotional connection. So they felt like I did a great job considering quite honestly, how I was raised and how my mother brought me up. They thought I did great. I think the experience also, even though I'd spent all of those years away, I do think maybe that's kind of like one of those hidden blessings, if you will. It caused me to look at how I grew up and look at where I came from, and I actually became pretty proud of that. You know, when I was growing up, I could not wait to leave a small town, Mayberry, USA, but you know, then after you grow up, you're like, wow, I had a good upbringing. You know, I had a good public school education. My mom was a phenomenal educator. She instilled that in me. I did well. This is where I came from. This is home. This is a part of me. I think I was able to sort of probably reconcile those parts of myself that used to try to run away from that. And I think part of this made me have to come back to terms with this is a part of who you are too. All these people, all of this. Yeah.
I've noticed that the most satisfied and truly happy people make use of what life gives them for their growth. Their main orientation is to find the intelligent design in whatever they're experiencing. To me, that's the definition of developing our depth, seeking and celebrating the intelligent design in what life gives us, even the hard stuff. When that's our attitude, we have a fundamental baseline of appreciation that's authentic.
I don't allow myself to think thoughts like, this is hard, this is more than I can manage. I focus more on what is possible and in what has been achieved and what's next. Appreciating the small things, appreciating the simple things. John noticed a caterpillar crossing the road and picked it up and put it on the side of the road so that it wouldn't get run over. He tried a new ingredient or two in his smoothie. He colored outside of the lines a little bit on his own. He went for a walk by himself the other day, unheard of. And so that keeps me going. I mean, that's very fulfilling.
I look at it, I take one day at a time. I don't look back. I look forward all the time and in the present. And I look at nature. I look at birds, flowers, trees, water, grass, and new friends that I've met who've been very helpful and supportive of me.
Developing depth is also a willingness to experience and navigate our emotions, especially fear and grief and powerlessness, but also not getting stuck there and moving through those feelings to a new place of stability and understanding.
At times it was hugely difficult and you feel overwhelmed. I had an image of being way out in the ocean at night, swimming by myself, and no one could ever understand what it was like. And then people would show up and offer help, and they would be there. And then when they got ready to leave, it was almost like, oh, that boat's leaving me, I'm going to be on that ocean again. But you learn to recognize the grief that you're feeling. One night I just climbed in bed with Paul, and I was crying, just sobbing. And he said, hey, what's going on? And I said, I just have to let some tears out, because I was really sad. So crying is really a good thing to do. It's a relief. It helps you acknowledge that this is a really huge change in your life. And it then clears the way, like after a storm, then you just look forward to, well, then how are we going to make this work? And right now we have to eat, and right now we have to get up, and we have people who want to see us. And so you just take life really moment by moment.
It was a hard 5 years. My life was consumed with taking care of her, whatever that looked like. Initially, it was getting her to the place where somebody's taking care of her, but even after she's in the facility, you're responding to the facility when they call. You're calling her and you're listening to her saying, I want to go home, and being upset with you because you've got her, you put her in there. I cried, I did, and I leaned on him. And I think that's why my grief has happened along the way. So when she died, I didn't have this thing, right? I didn't have this just like, I didn't just fall apart.
Go boo-hoo.
I didn't just fall apart.
Things aren't going to be right.
Yeah, because so much happened along the way. I cried a lot of tears along the way.
It is daunting to be put in a position that you're the recipient of what's going on, and there's not too much you can do about it. I can't storm out of the room. I can't hold a grudge, because I've got to ask that person for something very soon after that. So I become more zen, I guess, and just have to say, this will pass.
For my mom, I want her to be no pain, healthy as much as possible, and I want her to be happy. But I'm not responsible for her happiness either. I learned that from my cousin. He says, I want you to remind you that you're not responsible for her happiness. I thought that I'll make her happy by doing certain things. The only person that's happiness, for mom's happiness, is herself. And she always said that to me. She says, I'll be happy if you're happy. And she sees that being happy. She says, I'm very proud of you. She does, and for me, that's a lot. So that's what I give back to my mom.
When we slow down into our depth, we recognize that we've each received the freedom of choice. No one's been left out of that fundamental gift. We start to see that we not only have choice about what we do, but also to some extent how we think and what we feel. Developing our depth is exercising those choices. It's ultimately about growing and expanding our perspective.
Well, one of the things that that has been challenging for me as a caregiver is allowing the other person to be at choice. I don't feel like because John requires special care or attention that should be somehow removed from his ability. And so I have found that as we've moved into this phase of John's healing, because the lymphoma is no longer an issue, but now we're in that place where we have to maintain these lifestyle changes so that he doesn't become sick again. And within that, he's a grown man and he's at choice. And I have to respect that no matter what my opinion may be. And part of making more evolved choices is having the freedom to make some poor choices. That's from John's end of it. My end of it is to let it happen and to get out of the way. Not to the degree that he's living on Twinkies and soda pop, of course, but to the degree that he has an upset stomach because he made some poor food choices, or he didn't sleep well the last couple nights because he's decided to not exercise because I didn't drag him to the gym earlier. Allowing him to explore that luxury of choice and what it nets him. And the other part of it is I don't want our relationship to become one of bitterness or frustration, and I don't want to live the life of a parole officer or a police officer, monitoring everything he eats, everything he does, when he does it, when he doesn't do it. That's not a space I want to occupy. What I find is that the healthier John becomes, the more consistently he makes good choices.
The last time I saw her, when the dementia had taken over really, and we were sitting there holding hands, she made a comment to me, I want to see my car. If you fix my car, when I can be able to go home because you'll drive and go get it and come get me. And she reached over and held my hand. I kind of felt like maybe I should take my hand away, but she reached for me, and a week later she was gone. Never not take the opportunity to let somebody know what you feel or what you care about or what you're thinking. Sometimes it hurts, but as I had to tell my daughter, that too shall pass. Life goes on. Life goes on.
So, everybody gets old, You know, you just hope that you have a good life. And I always have the question, do you want to be mentally stable and not be physically capable? Or you're going to be physically capable and not be mentally stable? Same with my kids. I don't want my kids to go through that. I hope I don't be in the nursery home dripping. I'm telling you right now, it ain't going to go well with me. That's just not who I am. My grandma was 96 and she was sharp as nails, but she died from an infection, not even her heart. Some bacteria got her and I was into that shit. But she went almost on her own terms. I would like to go on my own terms.
There's no reason, if I keep pushing, I can't do more than I'm doing today. And next week, I'll be doing something else. I have days when I just can't do something I did the day before. But the next day, it comes back. And that's another problem with spinal cord injury. You can have it for 1 minute and not have it again the next minute. So you just have to deal with that. And just remember, a month ago, I couldn't do any of X, and now I'm doing it all the time.
Caregiving from me to my mom emotionally is me talking to her, and we talk about her day routine and day problems. The simple things, why I cleaned the house today and then the neighbor came through it, those are important things for her. When it comes down to it, you don't want to be alone, even as an older person. So for me, just sit down there and listen to her. My mom needs that. I mean, if you really pay attention to what she says to me, I love this, that I can see your face. So for me to do what? Just to push the button and ring her and talk to her, you know? And usually she says, how's it going today? Even if I talked to her 2 hours ago, anything changed? Not really. I can tell that makes her happy.
Partnership is working together and fostering the health and well-being of everyone on the team. Often this just means bringing to the table the gifts and abilities we already have. But whether we are a caregiver or receiver, the responsibility for each person's well-being is shared.
They come to the concerts. Mom came to the football game and watched the boys in the marching band. This summer my son took a class in the middle of the day and he doesn't drive yet, so she dropped him off and picked him up. He has sometimes doctor appointments that she takes him to. And
Haircuts.
Yeah, haircuts. I even had surgery a few weeks ago and Mom took me to the hospital and brought me home, and I was like, I thought I was going to be taking care of you, and here she is. She's taking care of me.
After his surgery, he was on a ventilator and he couldn't really speak, but he would spell out words and nod. And he was telling me he needed something, and we'd say, do you need water? Do you need mouth swabs? And I said, is it a long word, a short word? And he said, it's a short word. Yeah, he was nodding. And I finally figured out that he was saying, I need a hug. So I added that question to the top of the list. Do you need a hug? Do you need water? Do you need to be turned? So that's Paul. His heart was always there.
We've got a great team of caregivers, but you have to be a friend of those who are giving you care. I try to make it an enjoyable experience. I'd say, how far can you bring your hand behind your back? So do that to me. It may seem difficult and a little stiff, but I want to be able to get that direction. So they get it. They say, okay, you're not breakable.
When caregiving and receiving, it can seem like we need to shrink things down just to keep them manageable. But actually, one of the most important things we can do is expand our community. Who can we bring into the circle of cooperation to make us a well-oiled machine?
Sometimes we can be embarrassed about things, but I think you have to be willing to share what's going on. I was fortunate enough to work for a boss who understood. He himself had a mother who had Alzheimer's, because there were times when I just really had to literally leave work and hop on a plane and go to Louisiana. And he was okay. You know, just let me know how she's doing when you get there.
Our company is supportive of families. I mean, that's what our company is all about. So I was able to have some flexible time. So work, 3 10-hour days and then be able to work a half a day on Friday really helped me to be able to plan ahead of time, to be able to be here for all the deliveries and just to be able to go out and look for a place for them.
The minute before it happened, I was a working optometrist. It soon occurred to me, I've got to do something about my patients. I have to do something about my employees. I had a friend who's a lawyer come help me. I had a friend who's an accountant help me out. Charlie became power of attorney. Other optometrists worked in my office for a good bit of time.
We had to take each piece of this and just think through who can help with this and who can handle this. The practice is still thriving.
I left Louisiana when I was 17 to go to college. I had not been back there to live, so I had to reestablish. I can't say enough about the bank manager and the tellers were so helpful. They had known my mother through the years, so they were able to see when things were changing, and they were willing to talk to me and reach out and say something's wrong. So I intentionally made a couple of trips down to meet her doctor, to go with her. And that way when I would call and get updates, they would know who they were talking to. That was a critical piece. Also, the sheriff's department had a division where they paid attention to the elderly. And so I found out about that and I called them and they would stop and see how she was doing just to put eyes on her. People wanted to help.
And even when they knew the change of her, with her disease and everything, they still allowed her to be as much of a person of herself that she could.
Communication, compromise, and clear boundaries enable our relationships to be healthier, more functional, and more loving.
I myself had wanted John to just really approach his disease holistically. Let's try, some dietary changes. Let's try some lifestyle changes. If we don't see any improvement, you've still got chemo and radiation on the table. But John, being so heavily involved with the VA all these years, he really had a lot of confidence in what they were suggesting. So, we kind of had to meet in the middle somewhere. And so we removed all meat from his diet, and he basically was eating, 100% raw food. And he did go ahead and elect to have radiation and chemo. But I will say that, I really believe that the diet changes supported him throughout that process. And he was feeling so good. His physicality, the way, and his mental clarity sold it for me. I didn't have to work so hard after those first couple weeks because he noticed a difference. 3 days a week we go to the gym. On the off days we walk, we yoga. So much of the credit has to go to John because he was receptive. All of these ideas were very foreign. He had no exposure to them, ever. He wanted to be well, and he fully embraced whatever it was that was put in front of him.
What Dad did do in preparation for the move is he drew the condo to scale based on just the pictures I sent to him, and he was 100% accurate with it. And he drew out where all the furniture would go, so we had a floor plan mapped out, and so I took a photo of it so that when the furniture arrived prior to him, I knew where everything would go.
When John was receiving radiation and chemotherapy, this was new information to me. But apparently the waste that's created by the human body when they're ingesting radiation and chemotherapy is highly toxic. And if a healthy person is subjected to that toxic waste, it can be a very significant thing for the healthy person. It was something I, was profoundly concerned about, and yet was not willing to go use the restroom out in the backyard all the same. So, we had some adjustments to make. Those really tricky conversations around keeping the healthy person healthy so that they can continue to serve the patient. And there's really no other way to get through them than to just be very plain and very blunt and very professional. Reiterate what it was I needed, to do it in a kind way, and then reiterate why that was important. Because I think that for somebody that's been in an institutionalized situation like that, there's not a lot of explanation as to why things are the way they are. And so I did feel like communicating why we needed to alter this or that was greatly appreciated by the receiving end, because it allowed it to not be a personal attack in any way, shape, or form.
At times when I wasn't at my best, asking for forgiveness is really important, and then forgiving yourself. Talking through what maybe brought the difficulty. So there are requests that Paul needs taken care of right away, and I want to honor that always, and I've told him that, you know, if you're uncomfortable and you need me to stretch you or shift you, I will always stop to do that. If there are other requests, something that might wait to another time, I think you learn a language of saying, would you be willing to wait until this time so that I can complete this?
And that's the difficulty on my end, is I have to quit making the thought that everything is immediate. That it just occurred to me that somebody's birthday's coming up, and we've got to write a card today to get it to him on time. And I'll just say it. Well, it turns out he's behind me, I can't see him, and he's making dinner. And, you know, he'll say, well, Paul, I happen to be making dinner. So, you know, so you do have to lighten up.
You know, we can't let our life just be the next task that needs to get done. And sometimes I just need a break from what is, keep adding to that list. So I'll even say, let's just hold off. Unless it's just a real emergency, let's just hold. Let's not add anything to the list right now.
Caregiving and care receiving, it's the nature of relationships, and both roles are an opportunity for growth and mutual well-being. Choosing with intent, remembering love, trusting our instincts, aiming for wholeness, embracing change, acknowledging the changes, experiencing our feelings, letting go as much as possible, taking action to move with change. Taking care of ourselves, noticing where self-care is missing, identifying the self-care we'd like to have, putting it in the schedule, asking for support, and declining what is harmful to us. Developing our depth, making use of daily experiences for growth, being curious about the intelligent design and what happens, navigating emotions to move to new understanding and stability, exercising our choices, actions, thinking, and feeling. Acting as partners, fostering the health and well-being of each person, expanding our communities, problem-solving together, communicating needs and limits to make relationships more functional.
As we know, life is really just moment after moment after moment after moment. That's what a life is. Be forgiving, be resourceful, don't give up, and love is real. You get to know that. You get to know that what love is.